What is up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Leveling Up with JC with the Shot. As always, I'm JC with the Shot, classic JCC on Twitter, and I want to welcome you to Level 4. We are in week 5 of this, and to be honest, I am super happy with where we're at. For those of you that listened to last week's episode with Shifty Powers, one of my good friends, Robbie, we spent a good amount of time talking about Black Lives Matter and talking about everything that's kind of happening in the world. And there was such a great reception to that I am thankful for everybody that has tuned into this podcast so far, has left comments, has talked to it about me, and really has just shown support. I wanted a platform to talk about more serious things in gaming and in life and in culture, and this has been an opportunity for that. And I'm very appreciative for those that continue to watch, and those of you that may have just started. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey. It means a lot, and thank you for those that may have just watched last week's episode as the first one with everything happening and have said, like, man, I really appreciate what you're doing, and I'm going to continue to support and continue to watch and listen to your podcast, and that means a lot. So thank you so much. And so this week it is just back to me. We've had guests the last 2 weeks. We're going to continue to have guests on the show, but I kind of wanted to dive a little bit more into my story, as I've talked about in the prologue, as well as level 1, to what my journey has really looked like. And, last week we talked a little bit about culture. The week before we talked a little bit about mental health and gaming. And then the week before that, in level 1, I talked about my journey of where I started with gaming to where I'm at now. And, I'm going to hit my mic here. I love that. And where it continues to take me, right? Like, I never thought that I'd be doing a podcast about gaming at any point in my life. Podcasts, I don't even think were a thing when I was growing up until the last, 10 years, maybe. Podcasts have become to be a thing, and somebody can fact check me on that. I don't actually know the timeline, but it's something that I never thought of doing, obviously, when I was younger. And so it's great to be able to have this conversation and share a little bit more about my life and where things have fallen in that. And so this week, I really want to spend some time talking about, the influential characters that I've seen in my life, at least for me. I've talked about, the 3 most impactful games that have been a part of my journey, right? So it's been Halo, it's been Super Mario, it's been Fortnite, right? Like, those are the 3 most impactful games that I've had. But aside from those games, like, I have played so many more outside of those, obviously. Like, I am about to turn 27 in 3 weeks. So I have spent a lot of time playing games. I've spent a lot of times developing connections with characters, as weird as it sounds. Like, when you spend enough time with a game or with a franchise, that you begin to develop and begin to connect with characters on a deeper level, similar to if you were to watch like a TV show, or you were to watch a series. If you started with Game of Thrones from the beginning, you started with Harry Potter from the beginning. For those that watch Grey's Anatomy, I've never seen it. I shouldn't say I've never seen a season. I've seen episodes, but people tend to connect to these characters, and they tend to find things in these characters that they want to pull out of them and connect back to themselves. And I think that's what I've done in a lot of my gaming history without really knowing it, because it's not something that I think you think about all the time, right? You spend so much time on a game, and especially today in the games that are being created, like, some of these games have stories that last 40, 50, 60 hours, right? And then you get side content that adds another 10, 15 hours on top of that. Plus, you probably get downloadable content that adds even more. So gaming today is far more in depth than what it used to be. Like you could spend time playing a game. I'm thinking back to Super Mario 64, where you would spend a good amount of time collecting all 120 stars, but then you look at the people that have played it then and can still play it today, and people can speedrun this game in less than like 10 hours. Even, I mean, in less than 5 hours probably, and complete the whole game, but you don't get the whole story, obviously, because you're skipping through stuff. You're finding points and where you can avoid clips or you can avoid save points, whatever that looks like. I'm not a speedrunner by any means. I've watched it, but you don't get to develop that relationship. So even the games back then, like, there wasn't a lot of story and a lot of basis to the games that you probably played. And so for me, like, over the 2 decades that I've been playing games, that seems crazy to think about when I say it like that, there have been those characters for me, and there have been those stories that have encapsulated a lot of probably what I feel at times, and who I aspire to be. And so for me, the first person that I think of, and the first franchise and character that I've spent so much time with and about and learning about, even outside of the game itself. So I talked about this being one of my most impactful games for me, but the Halo franchise for me has been one of those stories that I've continued to follow along with, even though I don't play it every single day or play it nearly as much as I used to. So Master Chief, Spartan 117, whatever name you want to give him, he has been one of those 3 influential characters. I shouldn't say people. I guess you could, but influential characters in my journey. And his story progresses outside of these games. Like, there are books written in the Halo franchise. And that's something that after I played Halo 2, that's something I continued to explore, because I was like, man, like, this dude is so badass at what he does and the way that he approaches leadership, with his squad, and the way that he is so resilient, and the way that no matter what happens, like, he is going to continue to find a way. He is going to continue to fight. He is going to continue to, work towards a better tomorrow. And Halo itself is not a realistic game by any means, right? Like, you are fighting what's called the Covenant, and these aliens and these grunts and these brutes. But at the core of it, the story and the depth that they've added to Master Chief and the qualities that he has, right? Like, strong leadership. He has, this charisma and opportunity to be able to allow people to be able to follow him. He develops these relationships with, his AI, with Cortana and other individuals along his path, that really sets up for a dynamic relationship throughout the campaign and throughout the series. And for those of you that have played through the series, you will know that in one of the later games, like, Master Chief gets put into stasis, and he gets lost in space, and so the storyline shifts from focusing on him, and then it comes back, and the impact that he has on people that he's never met, and troops that he's never met, and Spartans that he's never met, like, just tells a story in itself, because these are people who have looked to Master Chief to find guidance and the heart and the motivation to be able to fight for what they believe in. And that's something that I will always aspire to do and always want to be able to accomplish in my life, is being able to fight for what I believe in. And if I have something to say, like, I hope that people will find, what is the word that I'm trying to think of? will find some substance in that, right? Like, I don't ever want to come across as having and sharing stuff that's not full of passion and support and X, Y, and Z. Like, I never want to show something or come across as being empty. And I don't think Master Chief ever showed that. And so for me, that was one of the most influential characters that I've come across so far. The other one, and I'm so excited because next Friday, The Last of Us Part 2 finally releases. The Last of Us is one of my all-time favorite games ever. This is honestly probably my favorite campaign and storyline that I've ever loved. It is probably the most meaningful to me, just because it was so well done. And Naughty Dog, like, what a studio! Like, they are focused on story. And Last of Us Part 2 comes out next week, so if I disappear for a while, that's why. Because I'm going to be so invested, and I've been waiting for this to drop for so long. And it's finally here. And so, Joel, who is the main character, one of the main characters, and protagonists in The Last of Us, the first one, he'll still be in the second one, but it's more focused on his daughter in that game. But essentially, the story of The Last of Us is it is set in a post-apocalyptic world where there's security checkpoints throughout like the world, and there's this organization that's trying to keep people protected, but at the same time, it becomes almost like a police state, and the world is overrun by these zombie figures, and there are scavengers, and there are people who are out there that are trying to live their lives, and they aren't always the the friendliest individuals. Obviously, if you've ever watched The Walking Dead, you know that when it comes to post-apocalyptic, you're always going to have those people who are just going to do what they need to do to survive. And Joel is one of those people. And for me, what I love so much about Joel and what I love so much about the story of that is because it really becomes a story of a father and his daughter, and everything that Joel will do to protect his daughter, and get her to a better place to live. And you know, in that storyline, like, his daughter Ellie she's got to be like 12 or 13, so she's still really young. And as we go into this next part of the story, it's 5 years later, so she becomes the main focal point, and Joel becomes older, obviously, as time works. Like, every day you become older, every minute you become older, like 5 years. So he's an older man. He doesn't have what he used to. And so I'm so excited to see what that dynamic shift of roles looks like between those two. But the thing that I loved about Joel is that he was willing to sacrifice and do whatever he could for his family, was willing to sacrifice and do anything that he could for his daughter. And that meant putting himself in the way of danger. And you know, for me, like, I have not had the greatest father figure in my life. And so when I look at that game and I look at him as a character and then translating that into relatable content in my life, like, I want to be able to have a relationship with my future children that I'm willing to put myself and my life on the line for them to be able to be successful, for them to be able to be safe and be able to live a life in general. And it's really sometimes hard, especially where the world's at currently, to think that that's going to be a possibility. But that's what I want to strive for, is having that relationship with my children that not only are we going on adventures together, but like we are able to be there for each other and support each other. So that's my second most influential. And so my third is a little bit different because I think it's changed throughout the years with this character, and that's Lara Croft. And the Tomb Raider series has always been, for lack of a better phrase, a sexist franchise in a sense, and it's always been sexualized to have Lara Croft in these games. Like, if you ever played one of the very first Tomb Raider games, like, you probably would understand that her proportions were unrealistic. And that's what drew men specifically to playing this franchise. Because the way that the world works, like, men didn't want a woman to be a protagonist in the game. Like, they were like, it's all about men, right? Like, it's Mario. Is the dude. Master Chief, he's the dude. Like Halo came out way after like the first Tomb Raider, but like thinking about women in gaming, women in culture, women in movies, always hypersexualized. And the reason that I find Lara Croft so influential for me is because she didn't need any of that to be a badass. Like, she legitimately held her own. And it's funny because I think about the relationship that I have with my mom, and she was just here a little bit ago before I started recording this podcast, and she is one of those heroes in my life. And I think it's funny for me to think about Lara Croft and then I think about my mom afterward, especially if the only thing you know about Lara Croft is from the movie that Angelina Jolie starred in. And that's the only conception that you have, right? Like, action hero, like dangerous stunts, does whatever. But for me, the thing that I loved about Lara Croft and the thing I love about my mom is that they're fearless. Like, they are, again, willing to put themselves on the line to get shit accomplished. Like, they're badass women. They don't need to be hypersexualized to be badass. And they don't need a man to be successful. Like, they don't. And for me, like, being able to see that in a woman and especially in gaming, like, for me, like, that is something that I'm super attracted to, because I would hope that whoever I end up marrying or being in a relationship with is going to be badass, is going to be able to take on the world on their own, but at the same time, like, not worry about what other people think. And Lara Croft was one of those bad bitches that didn't care what people thought. Like, she was going to do what she was going to do. She was going to beat the shit out of people. And I think look at the newest Tomb Raider, where things are a lot more realistic, especially in her body type. The game itself is still going to sell, and she's still going to be as badass as she was. And there's a poem that my best friend and I, Bear Claw, performed when we were in college. That's called Press Continue, which you can find on this YouTube as well. And one of the lines in it is, it says, "Fuck a Lara Croft," because you don't need sexualized parts or characters to be able to be successful and be badass. Like, that became such a draw for men to be able to sell that game that they weren't finding themselves in that character. And so for me, it's been great to see the evolution of that character to move from something that's super hypersexualized to not, and just focusing on Lara Croft as a person and as a character and how much she can actually accomplish. And that's I think for me, like thinking about those three characters, like if you were to put them all together in one game, like that would probably be the best game that was ever made. It's never going to happen, but they're still in that same category of being these characters that have focused on other people, have focused on the strength that they have themselves based on the circumstances that they were given. None of them have been given great circumstances in their lives, and I think that shows to all three of their resiliency. And for me, I think that's where I'm at in life currently. And as I was thinking about this, like those three characters are what I think of when I think of resilient, when I think of charismatic, when I think of being a leader, when I think of just full out being badass, are those three characters. And it's wild to think that gaming does that to somebody. But you spend so much time with these characters that it's almost like they're a part of your life. Similar to the people that you surround yourself with. You begin to take parts of people that you spend the most time with. And that for you, gaming is a majority of your time. You're going to begin taking parts of those characters into yourself. And that's the crazy thing that time and influence and storytelling plays in a person's life. And I would love to understand the psychological aspect of that. So if anybody knows why that is, I would love to have a conversation about that. And so as I kind of close out here, I do want to kind of run through an article, really, really short. I'm not going to read the article, but it's the top 5 most influential video game characters of all time, as addressed by Time magazine in 2017. I couldn't find anything that was new-ish. I mean, 2017 was 3 years ago, but I think it's interesting to see what those 5 are. So at number 5, Time magazine listed Link from The Legend of Zelda as being influential. Number 4, which I thought was kind of funny, is Pikachu as being the most influential. Pikachu created a series, like head of a series, right? Magical creatures, putting them in battle, showing up in a bunch of different games. Number 3, which I don't get, but it's also interesting because it's a big impact in gaming and history. So number 3 was Pac-Man. I'll let y'all think about that. Super interesting. Number 2, also on my list, Lara Croft. Super badass. Doesn't need anybody in her life. As I rambled on about her, right? Number 1, I think is crazy, is Peach. Right? Peach went from being a damsel in distress for so many years, and then very quickly became a very strong female lead. Top 5 most influential according to Time. And so I would love to hear what y'all's top 3 are. Go ahead and comment that down below. I'm going to have this conversation with some other friends in another episode. But I wanted to leave you all with this. And so as I kind of close out this week, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for the support. Please like, comment, and subscribe down below. If there are topics that you want to hear about or see me talk about with gaming, go ahead and drop those down below as well. Please continue to keep people in your hearts. Please continue to donate to Black Lives Matter, signing petitions. And as the U.S. starts to reopen, please keep in mind that social distancing and wearing masks isn't just for your own sake. It is for other people's. And so I hope you all have a great weekend. I hope to see you all next week. And thank you so much for tuning in. With that being said, go on, be great, and we will see you next week.